John, I want to talk now about a really sad situation in Georgia. Sad for multiple reasons, but there was a young mom named Amber Thurman who has a 6-year-old son. It sounds like she was pregnant, and she found out she was pregnant. She wanted to go to a clinic to have an abortion, and apparently she missed her appointment. So she got stuck in traffic or something on the way, and she was planning to have a surgical abortion at the clinic. When she was there late, they were not willing to do the surgical abortion anymore. So they gave her the abortion pill regimen. And when she took that medication, what happened to her, which has happened to many, many other women we now know about, is that the baby was not fully evacuated from her body, and she needed emergency surgery. She basically needed an emergency D&C. So the baby had already passed because of the first pill, which starves the baby of progesterone. But some of the baby's tissue was still left in her body, which is very dangerous. And she became septic and she passed away. That is a terrible story and extremely sad for her and for her family and her son, and just gutting to read about. It's also sad that this story has been immediately seized upon by the left and the pro-abortion lobby as an example of you wouldn't, if I was telling this story to somebody who is unaware of the current political climate, they would be like, oh, of course, this is going to become a political story that blames the abortion pill or blames an abortion clinic. But you would be mistaken. They're blaming pro-life laws in Georgia because they're claiming, and I'm going to put on my NPR reporter hat here and say they are claiming without evidence that she showed up at the hospital and that because of the pro-life laws in Georgia, the doctors refused to perform a D&C or an evacuation of her uterus because they were worried about getting in trouble under the law. There is very little, there is no evidence that that's why doctors waited. That's why there was a pause in between her showing up at the hospital and her becoming septic and passing away. So we need to be absolutely clear about that we do not know what that situation was. But I also want to point out, and I know this is where you want to take this as well, that under Georgia's pro-life law and every other pro-life law in the United States, a woman who shows up and needs emergency surgery that would include, a D&C is legal, especially in a case like this where the baby had already died and the doctors would essentially be removing the baby's tissue from the woman. That's not even an abortion, right? That's not an elective abortion. There might be a medical term abortion when you're removing the contents of a woman's uterus, but so we just need to be extremely clear that this would not have been a violation of Georgia's pro-life law to help this woman or to give her that surgery. And I'm assuming that the doctors would have known that in this case. It's unfortunate we don't know more details, but obviously this is going to be used politically, and that's really tragic.
Well, it's the second story. There was one that's been pointed to, including by presidential candidate Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and others on the Democratic side of things that talk about the overturning of Roe and the danger to women. And, the story that they've used is this story from this woman out of Texas, who, as I understand it, if I remember the details, because she couldn't be treated there, she had to fly to North Carolina. There she was given a chemical abortion, and she also died from complications thereafter. There's two parts of this story. Well, three, really. Number one is that the immediate and overwhelming set of headlines, and if you don't read below into the details and understand what's all at stake, then you think that pro-life laws are killing women, because that's the headline over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And in light of that, when we think about how all of the ballot initiatives have gone, and where people want to kind of maintain some kind of get out of jail free kind of card and abortion rights in the state. It's this impulse, I think, that we can rightly say is driving that, but I need to have that exception. I need to have that. We don't want women to die. And of course we don't want women to die. But the problem is that every single one of these state laws, as you said, for example, on the Texas story, over and over and over, it said the problem was she couldn't get a D&C in Texas. D&C is a procedure that's used in an abortion procedure, but it's also a medical procedure used in situations where it's necessary, but you have not actually killed a developing life in the womb.
So like a miscarriage where your body has not expelled all of the baby, a DNC would be used.
That's exactly that's exactly right. And what's happening is you're sometimes getting situations where the headlines and the reporting is that these states have banned DNC. When they haven't, they've banned abortion. DNC is a part of some abortion procedures, but abortion is a specific procedure to kill the life of a developing child in the womb. Miscarriage is not that. Doctors are not prevented from treating women who have suffered through a miscarriage and need a DNC in order to preserve their health. Doctors are not prevented at all from helping the mother. And even in the case of helping the mother in the extremely, extremely rare situation, that involves a life being lost in the womb along the way, that's not illegal either in these states. The other thing that's happening, and you've seen it a handful of times in the story, both of Texas and this Georgia story, is that the chemical abortion process is being described as a miscarriage. That's a problem. The last thing you're seeing, which is burying the lead, is that these are complications from chemical abortions. Yeah. And part of the other line of the narrative is that chemical abortion is safer than Tylenol. Have you heard that? Of course you have, because it gets repeated over and over and over. Now, we have a What Would You Say video coming out on this that very specifically addresses this question. And I'm just going to read from it. And this will be available in a couple weeks, but it's, this is what's true about this. The claim that Mifepristone, which is the first pill in the abortion pill regimen, is as safe as Tylenol is based on the total number of hospitalizations for each, but merely comparing the total hospitalizations for the abortion pill versus Tylenol is misleading. First, so many more people take Tylenol than abortion pills, right? So 60 million Americans use acetaminophen. How do you say that word? Acetaminophen?
Acetaminophen.
There we go. The active ingredient in Tylenol on a weekly basis. Just by comparison, over 500,000 women attempt chemical abortions each year. So you're comparing the denominator. You remember fractions in school? 60 million versus 500,000. So you can't compare the total number of hospitalizations when the denominator is so different. And by the way, when you actually look on its own, 1 in 25 women who take Mifepristone will end up in the emergency room. That's according to the FDA's own warning on Mifepristone, right? So it's not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. Here's the last thing. When women take Tylenol or this pain medication, and they take it as prescribed, that percentage of hospitalizations and emergency room visits goes even way down. So we're talking about an almost nil number. When women do go to the emergency room for taking Tylenol, it's because they've taken it. They've overdosed, right? When the 1 in 25 women that go to the emergency room for Mifepristone are going there because they've taken it as prescribed. Mm-hmm. So all this is the danger factors in this. So when these two stories both involve Mifepristone and the headlines are, this is because of pro-life laws, the level of misleading is stunning. It's a stunning misrepresentation that is being repeated at the highest levels of journalism and politics. And that's, when we talk about the fact that there are folks misleading, and we've got to be able to uncover that. This goes back to our conversation in the first segment. This is the level of deception we're talking about. I don't know that, DEI rises to that level of imminent danger. But in this case, my goodness, the misinformation here has been overwhelming, essentially.